Welcome to California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. I'm glad you're with us. Our guest today, Bonnie Lowenthal, member of the California State Assembly, will be speaking with the Assemblywoman about the importance of the ports, about some exciting developments in the ports, and we'll be inviting on a good friend of hers later on. He is her Veteran of the Year for the 54th Assembly District. Before we invite on Captain McKenna, I want to speak with you about the ports and the importance of the twin ports to Southern California and the entire state and the entire nation, please.
Well, it carries 40% of the trade coming into the United States, so that is what is important to the country. To the area, there are well over 350,000 jobs. It's critical to the economy of Southern California and the entire state because of the exports of agriculture and the imports from Asia and other parts of the world.
And as I understand it, if you look at the greater Southern California area, close to 750,000 jobs rely upon the ports. I mean, it's a huge economic engine.
Easily that many, yes it is.
What's nice about ports, or what can be nice about ports, is they can be centers of commerce. They can be places where families can go to enjoy, where businesses can bring tourists. Our twin ports have had some struggles in that area, and you're looking to change that.
Well, you know, a number of years ago, City of Long Beach and the Port of Long Beach was able to create the Pike and the Convention Center. So there's a tremendous amount of activity there.
They've done well.
Port of LA, along with San Pedro, which is part of the city of Los Angeles, has worked for years to create that waterfront as a destination, and it has finally happened.
Has it happened?
And it has happened because there are thousands of people lining up to see the USS Iowa, which has a permanent place now, not only in our history, but at the Port of LA.
And I want to talk about the USS Iowa. As you know, and I learned recently this fact from Jerry Shipsky, from Tim Grobady, that Long Beach actually grew up with many immigrants from Iowa.
Oh, yes.
So it's kind of interesting that the USS Iowa is at the neighboring port.
It is interesting. I mean, Long Beach was called Iowa by the sea, but it is very appropriate to have it at the Port of LA. I've been on this ship. It's absolutely incredible, and it has a great history.
Tell us.
Well, you know, it was commissioned in the early 1940s, so it's perhaps 60 years old now. It has been in many theaters of war. It carried FDR to Tehran for a secret conference with Churchill and Stalin.
That's huge. I mean, this is a huge historic event that the ship that we can now walk upon in the Port of Los Angeles played such a pivotal role in the history of the 20th century.
Yes,
I mean, the Tehran conference that really set the face of modern Europe and the world throughout the century.
Right. And it was interesting when you think about it that while we were allies then, the Iowa played a role in the Cold War in subsequent years.
I want to go back to FDR, though. We know he was a larger-than-life man. He was wheelchair-bound. Not everyone knew that then. And he had certain needs, and they built him something special on the USS Iowa. What did they build him?
Not only an elevator, but a bathtub. And I saw that bathtub, and you know, you don't get excited about bathtubs except that it was for him and him alone.
Now,
I wouldn't say tiny, but it's not huge.
Now, the first President Bush, when he was vice president, I understand, was aboard the Iowa during a recommissioning ceremony. So this ship had some real important moments in American history. President Reagan during the 1986 celebration of the Statue of Liberty. I mean, this is not just any old ship. This is an important ship. I want to talk to you, though, Assemblywoman, about how you and the team was able to get the Iowa here.
Assemblymember Warren Furutani and myself actually sponsored a resolution that passed in the Assembly to bring the Iowa to the city of Los Angeles, and it was competitive. Northern California wanted it as well, and I'm just so glad that we won. Frankly, I think there will be so many more people that actually see it in Los Angeles because it's part of an entire waterfront. As I said, The destination now includes
Crafted.
a facility called Crafted. It was developed by the folks who did Bergamot Station in Santa Monica, which has been a fantastic success. And I was there for the opening.
Tell me everything, everything.
Well, I'm resisting going back because, you know, I'll just spend
Buy
all my
everything.
money. Yeah,
You got great jewelry.
Thank you very
Of
much.
course, my wife would be pleased.
Oh, okay, okay, we'll have to shop together.
Yes, we will.
So shopping at Crafted is going to be a great experience for anybody that goes down to the port. It's on Harbor Boulevard and 22nd Street.
Got it.
It has well over 100 booths of everything handmade. I mean, that clearly is the requirement. So whether it's jewelry or clothing or food products, artisanal foods, it's all handmade and beautiful, beautiful stuff.
What's remarkable to me about what you're describing is all of these developments have occurred in the midst of very difficult economic times. How have you been able, with your team in the grandest sense, to get Crafted off the ground, to get the USS Iowa? I mean, you had to raise, metaphorically speaking, millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, to open Crafted, to get the USS Iowa to Los Angeles.
The team was the Port of Los Angeles, along with the city of LA and San Pedro in particular, which has its own Chamber of Commerce, its own business community, and the residents who so badly wanted to see activity along the port. And so I give full credit to them. Their idea, their money, they made it happen.
And at the same time, I can remember 5-10 years ago when I would go to the port for whatever reason to go on a cruise or drive by, it could be tough to breathe. I could feel it. But guess what, Assemblywoman? Not anymore.
Well, the Clean Air Action Plan has demonstrated that we can grow the economy and we can grow green. So the emissions have been vastly improved. By the way, in addition to, excuse me for interrupting, in addition to the Iowa and Crafted, the Port of LA put in a beautiful fountain which plays every night to music. There's a park. I know my staff was there last night. We do fingerprinting of kids. So the whole waterfront is lively now.
It's about time. I want to shift gears and talk about a project in the Long Beach port, and that is the Middle Harbor Project. As I understand it, this project is so significant, so important to Long Beach, to Southern California. Give us a sense of that.
Well, it's important for many reasons, not only because of the jobs it's going to create now for the building, but for the future efficiency that will happen based on on-dock rail. The containers that come in will be plugged in to, they're not exactly electrical outlets, but with electricity.
So they're not idling.
Exactly, that will reduce the emissions dramatically. The containers will be offloaded onto rail, so it will be swifter and much more efficient. And in future years, the Panama Canal, of course, will be able to handle container ships. We want to beat the canal.
And that is a term we use.
Oh, yes. We want to make sure business stays in California.
And once the Middle Harbor Project is done, as I understand it, 14,000 permanent jobs.
That's
so
correct.
It's great news. Okay,
yes.
When we come back, Assemblywoman, I want to speak with a friend of yours. His name is Richard McKenna. You recently named him the 54th Assembly District Veteran of the Year. He is from San Pedro. He has served our nation honorably, and the good news is he is still serving our nation in a slightly different way, and I'm very excited to meet him. Okay, when we come back, will be Richard McKenna and, of course, Bonnie Lowenthal. My name is Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on California Edition. Welcome back to California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. I am so glad that Assemblywoman Bonnie Lowenthal brought a friend of hers to join us. His name is Richard McKenna. He is from San Pedro, and he is a veteran extraordinaire. will explain why Ms. Lowenthal decided to name Mr. McKenna as her Veteran of the Year in a moment. But first, Richard McKenna, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your service. Why don't you tell us about your storied career in the Navy from 1963 to 1991?
Thank you, Brad, for that build-up, but
yes.
I might need to tear down a little bit here, but thank you very much for having us, and thank you, Bonnie, for your selection here. Yes, I'm a 1963 graduate of the United States Naval Academy.
Just the Naval Academy, that's all.
That's
just the Naval Academy,
Navy's
one of the most
good.
Prestigious institutions in the country, impossible to get into, but okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, luck has a little bit in there, you know. I mean, I had a little bit of a good track experience at the time, and so that got me there. But anyway, I graduated, went into the surface Navy. I'm what they would call a surface warfare officer. I had about 10 sea tours, 3 of those in command. You know, a couple of significant ones, I guess you might say, was commissioning the USS New Jersey as executive officer. I was a Commodore of a squadron that was in the Persian Gulf during the Iran-Iraq War, escorting Kuwaiti tankers. And I particularly love my 1 year in Vietnam as the commanding officer of the Ventura County in the Mekong Delta.
So you clearly served our nation during some of the most trying times in the 20th century. And we honor you, we thank you for that. We'll talk about what you're doing now later, but I want to turn to the Assemblywoman and ask her, how did you learn about the remarkable service of Richard McKenna, and why did you choose him to be your Veteran of the Year?
Well, first of all, you know, it is so inadequate just to give an award to thank people for their service. And you heard about some of his service. But when we were researching the USS Iowa coming to Los Angeles, we started hearing about Dick McKenna and all of his service, really not only in the Navy, but what he continues to do today. And I think that's an interesting story that you might want to ask.
And we'll talk about your service today, but I would be remiss if I did not mention 3 Legions of Merit, 2 Meritorious Service Medals, a Navy Commendation Medal, a Navy Achievement Medal, and a number of unit commendations. It's a short list. I mean, it's remarkable what you have done for our nation. Why don't we talk about what you're doing now, because it has been over 20 years since you have retired.
It has been over 20 years, and I'm very fortunate to work in the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. I always wanted to do that. Frankly, before I joined the Navy, I was considering working in the port myself, or going to sea at least.
Are you from San Pedro?
I'm sorry to say. Well, I'm not sorry to say. I'm a New Yorker.
You're a New Yorker.
Yeah,
it's
I'm from
good
New
to
York.
have you.
Yes.
As are you.
Yes.
As are my parents.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So what are we all doing
exactly
here? Anyway, but no, I am now working in the Marine Exchange. The Marine Exchange is a very interesting organization, small, but very big in the context of the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. We're, in essence, the de facto operations center for both of the ports. The Marine Exchange has been around since 1923, doing maritime information. We're the ones that provide the schedules to all of the people of the port. And about 18 years ago, we started into a partnership with the U.S. Coast Guard to run the vessel traffic service. So it's not totally accurate, but people you know, understand that it's kind of like the air traffic control for the ports.
Oh, that's a good metaphor. I appreciate that. So, Bonnie, how did you decide that this would be your Veteran of the Year? I mean, it's obvious, but give us a little more as to what went into this.
Well, I think that his service in the Navy was quite incredible. And then his continued service, not only the work with the Marine Exchange, but with ITEP. You might want to tell them a little bit
what
about
is
that.
ITEP?
And his involvement in the USS Iowa. So I don't know how he cramps it all in 24 hours a day. I really don't.
Well, you know, we at the Marine Exchange work with a few other nonprofit organizations. And the one that Bonnie mentioned is the International Trade and Education Program. It's it had its start in Wilmington, And basically, it's matching the industry with high school students and showing them what the port is all about and where job opportunities might lie. The high school had a pretty low graduation record, and so we started dividing it up into different academies on trade, safety and security, environment, hospitality, all of the different things that work into the port's fabric. And it's been quite a nice turnaround, a very rewarding turnaround. And we're expanding. We're even trying to move into Long Beach, as a matter of fact, to get some of that working here as well. Of course, the Port of Long Beach has some great maritime industry relationships here, and so we'd like to see the same thing.
So how did you find out the good news that you had been so selected?
Phone call. I got a phone call from Nikki.
Nikki, who is in the audience. That is Assemblywoman Lowenthal's key aide in the district.
Yeah, that's right. So I was actually kind of surprised.
Did you know each other well? Did you kind of know each other?
No, we didn't know each other at all. And of course, every year when we have to pick the person to represent all the veterans in our district, and you can imagine Long Beach, San Pedro has a huge population. But nobody personified the glory, the challenges of the services as Dick did.
So tell us about your involvement in bringing the USS Iowa to San Pedro, which is a huge, huge accomplishment. We are so glad it's here.
Well, truth be known, I kind of just helped them when they had different questions about the port and all of that. I was a kind of a general advisor in terms of berthing and location and just general port relationships. So it was sort of like I was a little bit more on the remote side, and knowing about battleships that kind of helped with the discussion.
But as a veteran of the Navy, give us a sense of the magnitude of this placement.
Well, it is absolutely perfect. If you consider that the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach really owe a lot to the Navy. In other words, Dewey's Great White Fleet came in here, saw the possibilities. That's what kind of constructed the breakwaters, through the 20s and 30s and all of that. And who were there? The battleships and destroyers and cruisers and so on and so forth. Up until, and I forget the dates exactly, but it was something like around February of 1941. This was the home for the battleships before they moved to Pearl Harbor, before they moved them forward to Pearl Harbor. So it's a perfect marriage. Now the Navy has left. The Navy left here in the early 90s, and yet the Los Angeles basin is so big with veterans and former military. It's just a perfect location for a battleship, and battleships being what they are. Battleships are, I like to call them industrial works of art, but they really have a romance about them.
How was the opening for you?
It was a nice progressive opening.
I heard about that. Briefly.
I'm actually talking about the transit down, and we at the Marine Exchange are supposed to be tracking these vessels, and people calling in as to where is it now, when's it going to get here, so on and so forth. It was like about a week to 10 days of USS Iowa,
I can imagine,
before all said and done. And then, of course, I think you were talking about our trip up the main channel.
All I can say is congratulations. Thank you so much for your service. I am glad you are still heavily involved in the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. Thank you so much for bringing Captain McKenna. We appreciate it. When we come back, we'll be speaking with James Johnson. He's a member of the Long Beach City Council. I'm Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back. Welcome back to California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. Our guest now is James Johnson. He is a member of the Long Beach City Council. And I want to speak with you about the ports. Long Beach Port, Los Angeles Port, the Twin Ports. Could you give me a sense of how important the ports are to Long Beach and the entire region?
Well, they're incredibly important, Brad. You know, these ports are basically the economic engine for Southern California. A large percentage of our jobs in the Long Beach area comes from the goods movement. But not just that, 40% of all the goods for the nation that are imported come through this port complex.
And I have to say that when you look at the Long Beach Port, as well as the Los Angeles Port, they have done a great deal to try to green the ports. And in fact, I think it was this year that Long Beach completed its Clean Trucks program. So there has been an affirmative effort to try to, clean up the air, clean up the area. Tell me about that.
Well, that's right. I think, historically the problem has been you have ports which are a national asset and very important, but they haven't been great for their neighbors. So it's been something that's been great for the region, great for the nation, but for people living next to the port, what they see is diesel exhaust, higher rates of asthma, higher rates of cancer and lung disease. So what we're trying to do is move away from the paradigm of regional win and national win, but neighborhood loss to everyone winning together.
But over the last 5 years, as I mentioned, it does seem to be working. I mean, this Clean Trucks program has been a tremendous success. As I understand it, air pollution has gone down 90% in 3 years around the Long Beach Port. That's a massive number.
That's right. And I think what I've heard is 80% from the trucks, because remember, we still have things like ships, which are largely unregulated.
But aren't they plugging in now instead of idling? Well,
when the ships are in port, they do plug in. But when they're coming into port, they're still burning relatively dirty fuels. And the issue there is that we can't regulate them because it's under international law. So yes, we've done a pretty good job on trucks, and that's been great. There's still a lot more work to do. But you're right, we're moving in the definitely positive direction. There's more to go, but I think we're going in the right direction.
And so you are looking to go even further.
That's
right. And you are spearheading an effort by the City of Long Beach by applying for a grant. It's called the Greenhouse Gas Emission Reduction Mitigation Grant Program. A lot of words, but tell us what that is.
Well, a lot of words, but the concept's pretty simple. The concept is, if we're going to grow the port, then the neighborhoods near the port should see some of the benefits of that growth. Specifically, we're going to mitigate some of the negative effects of port growth.
Well, if you say if you're going to grow the port, you are growing the port. I mean, as I understand it, we just got great news with the Middle Harbor project. I mean, that project is going. It's gonna, it's $4.6 billion. It's a huge project, 14,000 permanent jobs.
Right. Well, and that's actually where this grant comes from. So the idea with the Middle Harbor is, let's grow the port, let's bring the jobs and all the benefits, but at the same time, let's set aside $15 million for the local neighborhoods for programs that can benefit them. That way, those residents can see that port growth isn't just good for the region, it's going to be good for them too.
So let's talk about it, because the grant is very specific, and it talks about the urban forest that is Long Beach, that is Los Angeles County. Explain what you're focused upon through this grant application.
Sure. Well, there's 3 areas that I'm most interested in the grant. One area was planting an urban forest in the west and central Long Beach, areas that need it the most. The second area is basically putting in new LED lights that are more energy efficient and improving our neighborhood lighting. And the final area is a new green mulch wall that'll be the first wall in the nation, if constructed, to be built in this fashion.
Let's talk about that urban forest, because we so often forget how symbiotic the relationship is between humans, their machines, and trees. Explain why adding, I think you're looking to add, what is it, 6,000 more trees through this grant?
That's right. Yeah, 6,000 trees. We get excited when we plant 50 or 100 trees, so 6,000 is a game changer. Well, the benefits of trees are so numerous. Obviously, they improve neighborhoods, they improve property values, they provide shade, they provide cooling for homes, so you don't have to run the AC.
But
well, I'll say most importantly, they provide air quality improvements. So one thing people don't realize is when you have trees outside, what those trees are doing, they're sucking in pollution, bad air, and they're putting out good air. So people may not realize that you want trees, because that will do what we need to do, which is clean up the air in these neighborhoods.
Okay, so the application has been filed. We're waiting for the results. We're hopeful that the grant will be granted. Talk to me though, assuming that the grant goes forward, it's not going to be that you just start, planting some trees. There's an educational component to it. There's a neighborhood involvement component to it. Explain.
That's right. We need to do a lot of education. Sometimes when people hear trees, they just think leaves falling on my lawn or sap on my car, so that is an issue. So part of it is educating people, let them know, here are all the positive benefits of trees. Also letting them know we're not going to plant any old tree. We're not going to plant trees that destroy their sidewalks or streets.
Yeah, I got to talk about that because I live in the city of Los Angeles, and what is it, maybe 40, 50 years ago, they planted a specific type of tree, you probably know the name, that literally destroys sidewalks. I mean, my sidewalk is buckling, and there's no money to repair sidewalks. And so tell us about that.
Well, a tree that looks great in Central Park may not be appropriate for outside your home.
Right.
I mean, some trees just need more space. So what we've done is we have a list of about 20 or so trees that will not destroy the sidewalks, that are appropriately sized so that they'll look good while not destroying our infrastructure.
Big maple leaf, jacaranda, sweet shade, camphor tree. I mean, it's a significant list. So where are the trees going to be planted?
Well, primarily in the West Long Beach, Central Long Beach area. So the area basically closest to the port. It's in the area called 1A and 2A.
Right,
but the bottom line is the areas closest to where the port is operating, so near the Los Angeles River.
So, which is great news in itself because we know the LA River is going through a revitalization itself. And so it's a win-win. But the trees are planted, okay, that happens. But how do we maintain these trees? Because in the final analysis, if there's no maintenance, I mean, you may get the grant, what do you do to make sure they stay healthy?
Right. Well, one thing we're going to do is educate residents that we need their help, particularly in that first year. In the first year of a tree's life, you do need to water it, make sure it gets through that first hot summer. But then after that, they typically can live just on the natural water underneath the ground.
Could you explain the mulch program? That's one portion of the grant application.
Yeah, well, right now we have a Terminal Island Freeway that goes basically from the port to the Union Pacific Rail Facility with no sound wall. So you've got a high school next to that, you've got an elementary school next to it, and residents with no barrier. So what they see every day is they see diesel trucks running right by their house with all the noise and all those negative impacts. What we're saying is we should have corrected this 30 years ago, but we're going to do this now to have that mulch wall to provide the visual barrier.
What does that mean, a mulch wall?
Well, it's the first in the nation, so this will be news to a lot of your viewers. A traditional sound wall is made of brick or concrete, and what that does is it does provide some sound protection, but a lot of the sound bounces off it because it's a hard surface. Instead, what we're proposing is to have two fences filled with tree clippings in between, basically mulch, because that's going to absorb the sound much better. Additionally, we're going to plant vines on it, which will actually help to, once again, improve air quality and provide, I think, a much more beautiful finish to have a vine-covered wall rather than a stone, or I should say a brick wall that's just going to be tagged anyway.
How did a nice lawyer like you think of this idea?
Well, I'll tell you, it's a little cheaper too.
So I think true? Okay.
It's actually better and it's more fiscally prudent.
Where is the mulch coming from?
Well, the mulch is actually coming from the city's tree trimming. So when we trim trees, instead of taking that tree trimming to a landfill, for example, and causing all those problems, we're reusing it. So it's another reason why this is more environmentally sensitive.
Okay, so let's talk about this grant, because in the end, grants are competitive. You do need to get the granting authority to approve your application. Where do we stand? To whom are you applying?
Well, we're applying to the Port of Long Beach. So the Port of Long Beach has gotten, many grants, and it is competitive. So we may not get everything we want, but I'm confident that, some of these things will be funded.
And is it as a result of the Middle Harbor project that this grant period has opened up?
That's right. So the Middle Harbor project, they've already set aside the $50 million
for green?
For these kind of projects. $5 million is for this phase of the grants. So $5 million is waiting, and they're just deciding which projects they want to fund. There are other great projects too, but I think these are the ones I'm most interested in.
I mean, I would presume Port of Long Beach, City of Long Beach, it seems like it's a no-brainer that the application would be approved, no?
Well, I mean, like I said, I think there are a lot of great projects out there, and but I think
to whom are you competing against?
Well, there are actually other Long Beach projects and other organizations. You might have nonprofits applying. I haven't seen all the applications,
there
but
you have it.
I think we have a strong application.
Okay, his name is James Johnson. He is a member of the Long Beach City Council. My name is Brad Pomerance. Thank you so much for watching Charter California Edition.